In conversation with Audrey Kalman. Audrey Kalman writes fiction with a dark edge about what goes awry when human connection is missing from our lives. She's the author of three novels and short fiction collection, Tiny Shoes, Dancing and Other Stories. Her stories and poems have appeared in numerous print and online literary magazines. She has been active with the California Writers Club since 2013 as past president of the Exhale Pennsylvania branch and editor of the branch Fourth Zone Anthology. With Jennifer Browdy, she co-created the free online Bet Your True Story Writers community in 2021. She holds an undergraduate degree in creative writing and a master's degree in journalism. She offers editing and coaching services for writers and is perpetually at work on another novel. And in today's episode of Auto Interview, it's my utmost pleasure, joy, and excitement to have on the show today, Audrey Carman. How are you doing, Audrey? Nice to have
I'm
you on.
doing well, thank you. It is lovely to be here, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to talk about books and writing.
Absolutely. It's lovely too to have you on the show today. Quite exciting, really. I've been read to some of your works on the internet space. I find it to be quite commendable, quite amazing, and it's lovely that we're here to sit down and have a conversation around it. So thank you once again for coming on. So Audrey, I need to first say that I am taken aback by the description page of your book, Tiny Shoes Dancing and Other Stories on Amazon, which delve into the complexity of human relationship. I would like to ask you, could you tell us about the background of the making of this book, how the book come to be, what inspired you to start in the first instance, what inspired the making of Tiny Shoes Dancing and Other Stories? Just a little bit of snippet into the making of the book, that'll be great, really.
Well, I think the book itself didn't have a particular inspiration
Yeah.
because it is a collection of stories. So
Hmm.
at a certain point, I had realized that I had written and published many, many short stories,
Hmm.
and I wanted to put them in a form where they were all together.
Hmm.
So that was what led me to create the book itself
Wow.
and get it out into the world. But I had been thinking a little about the inspiration for individual stories, and that is something that carries through whether I'm writing a short story or a novel. A
Hmm.
lot of my inspiration comes from a single image, something that I see, something that piques my curiosity. And it's kind of a spark for diving into the imaginative world so that I get
Uh,
into. So that's how many of the stories came about.
wow.
And you mentioned in the introduction that I'm perpetually at work at another novel,
Hmm.
and that has been true for the last 25 years at least. But I love writing short fiction because it is so much easier in some ways. In some ways, it's harder than writing a whole
Right.
long book.
Yes.
But in many ways, one major way that it's easier and more satisfying is that it's finished sooner. So even if it's difficult, you can actually finish it usually in a number of months rather
Right.
than years and years. So I love to sprinkle in short story writing as I'm working on a novel. And
Hmm.
that's how this book came about, was this big collection and wanting to get it out into the world.
Well, that's a lovely introduction into the making of a writer. That's a lovely introduction into becoming an author, really. You sound like you've got a lovely ride into the literature world. Quite beautiful. And I'd like you to raise the book to the camera. If you have a copy close by of Tiny Shoes Dancing and Other Stories, if you have a copy there, I'd like you to raise it to the camera just so we see what it looks like. You've got a
Yes.
beautiful cover in there. Oh, I love the making of it. I love the dance in the middle. Looks like a Cinderella. And I love the lighting that comes from on top and shines
Uh,
down to one section. And why the old text go in the other way around. Quite beautiful, really. Would you like to talk about the
Thank
making
you.
of the cover?
Yes, I was very lucky to have been in a writing critique group. So, with a fellow writer who was also a graphic artist and designer.
Oh,
So,
wow.
when it came time to actually, I can hold up a couple of my other books because she did all three covers for me. My
Wow.
very first one, which is called Dance of Souls,
Wow.
and next one, What Remains Unsaid, and Tiny Shoes
Wow.
Dancing. So, when it came time to do that, I asked her if she would be willing to work with me, and she said yes, and I loved what she did.
Wow.
And I don't know if you can quite tell, but my theme in my writing is dark. So this is actually a skeleton that is in a
Oh.
ballerina costume,
Mm,
and it relates to the topic of the story. But it's
wow.
a little, people have commented on that. Oh, a skeleton that's a ballerina. What is that? And it's not a horror story. It's very realistic, but that's the
Wow.
symbolism is the skeleton.
That's amazing to know. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. And also, Audrey, many of your stories touch on themes of disconnection and searching for meaning, which I think it's very crucial in our current world today. Very important, even in human experiences. Many of your stories touch on themes of disconnection and the search for meaning. I wanted to ask you, do these themes stem from personal experiences? Or are they observation of the world you've seen around you, if in any way?
I would say both.
Oh,
I'm an only child and
oh,
grew up in a very rural part of New York State on the East Coast. So I spent a lot of time alone, and I never felt particularly lonely or that I
wow.
needed anybody else really,
Yeah,
although I did have an imaginary brother for a while. And but as I got older, I really started to develop this, I would almost call it a craving for connection with other humans.
mm,
And I've been searching for that and trying to find various ways to fulfill that all my life. And of course, I've noticed, I think it's a really deep human need for all of us to connect
wow,
with other humans.
yeah,
So I've been playing with that as a theme. And one reason I love writing so much and love developing characters is it feels to me that's one way that we can really get inside of somebody else, which
wow,
of course the only way I mean, we can't do that at all in the
yeah,
in the real world, but in our
yeah,
imaginations, we can really inhabit other people and understand the world from their point of view and really
absolutely.
develop a sense that we are all one, we are not separate. So
Mm,
it's all kind of tied together in terms of the themes that I write about
oh,
and
wow.
means to me.
That's an amazing one, really. And particularly as someone who has written quite vastly into the field of literature and read a lot of books, I love the themes of disconnection and the search for meaning, the search for existence, the search for identity, and the search for a purpose on here. Quite beautiful you've mentioned in there. Thank you for sharing.
I think the meaning part of it, I'm not a particularly religious person, although I'm spiritual.
Philosopher.
I've never had everything laid out in terms of, oh, this is who you are and this is what life means and just take it
Uh,
and run with it. So for me, it's been a search all my life for why am I here? What is my purpose? What does everything mean?
yeah,
And that is another theme that I've explored. I think that's a little more, I think everybody does that, but for me,
absolutely.
that's been a real search through my writing to
Yeah.
figure that out for myself.
Thank you for sharing. And I also see that you have another book titled What Remains Unsaid. And
Yes.
goodness, I need to say you've got an amazing title names. Quite captivating, quite compelling, quite awesome. It's the one that after you've seen it, you'll be like, oh wow, this sounds quite intriguing. Let me see and pick up and see what the story is all about. It's a compelling, it's a catchy one. I need to say it's quite a catchy title. What remains unsaid, yeah. Now, for the sake of readers who haven't read that yet, and without giving much information away, could we have a sneak of what you'd expect in terms of themes and subject lines picking up what remain unsaid?
I won't give anything away by telling you how the book begins because it's right
Yeah.
on the cover. It begins with a an adult son holding his mother hostage at gunpoint in her kitchen,
Wow.
which is very dramatic and emotional and frightening. The book actually really relates to what we've just been talking about in terms of the themes of disconnection and understanding, and the fact that the only way we can know another person really is through the words that they speak and how we
Absolutely.
interpret and hear the words. And
Right.
of course, when we don't say things,
Mm,
then there's a huge
yeah.
opportunity for misunderstanding and not
Absolutely.
knowing. So the
Yeah.
book is really an exploration of this relationship. It goes back in time from that very fraught moment to
Mm,
look into how did they get to this point? Why
right.
are they here?
Yeah.
What led them here? And it turns out that a big part of it has to do with not being heard, not being able to speak, keeping
Right.
secrets. So
Mm,
you kind of get the story of what led up to this moment.
mm.
And um, I have to say it is dark and it is a heavy book in some ways, but it really does dive into those topics.
Yeah, I love the fact that you mentioned that, when we do not speak, sometimes could lead into misunderstanding. Even in terms of relationship or people living together, silence sometimes could be mistaken for something else, and it could cause some misunderstanding because it's in the process of speaking. That's how you get to know what is in somebody's heart. Like, it's the process of speaking that you get to, oh, you're being expressive. You tell me your heart. But once you keep quiet, we're wondering, what's a lot going on in our mind? Maybe so many things is going on in their mind because sometimes there could be a lot hidden in silence and it could lead to some misunderstanding, to be frankly speaking. So I think it's very good, yeah, to communicate and things. I love the fact that you mentioned that as a team.
Yeah. And the other aspect of that
Yeah.
is, and it actually goes to how I was inspired to write What Remains Unsaid, is
Mm.
that when we don't know people's stories,
Yeah.
we can be very surprised by the difference between what we see on the outside and what's on the inside. And the
Absolutely.
inspiration for this book really came. I was with my son a number of years ago,
Mm.
and he was taking a ski lesson, and he was out all day. I was sitting in the lodge waiting for him and doing some writing.
Mm.
And a woman whose kid was also doing that happened to start up a conversation, and we talked, and I
Yeah.
was just amazed. She began to share all of these things about her life. And she talked about an alcoholic husband and a
Mm.
estranged daughter. And as I was listening to this, I'm looking at her and I'm thinking, she just looks like a really ordinary person. Like I would never guess that this
Mm.
was inside of her and this was her life.
Uh,
So that led me to think, okay, here we have these two ordinary people. And
mm.
if you pass them on the street, this mother and son, you would never guess what was
Uh,
going on between them or inside of them. And I really find that fascinating. And that also is the what remains unsaid part. It's
oh,
the
wow.
difference between what we are inside and what we project to the outside.
Yeah, I'd like you to show that to the camera what remains
Oh
unsaid
yeah.
so we can see what it looks like.
Yeah.
Beautiful cover. Oh, I love the making of that. Look at that.
Yeah, my
The
friend's
cloud
cover.
cover over there and something that
Yeah.
looks like a bridge, the bicycle and the water
It's a
in between,
bicycle
I think.
on, yes, indeed it is. And
Lovely
again,
one.
you'll have to read the book to find out what the bicycle means to the characters, but
That's
it is.
amazing. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you. And one of the things that fascinates me so much about writing is the fact about how authors, especially novelists like yourself, would sit down and craft long sentences and bring words together in a way that sentences makes paragraph and paragraphs makes pages and pages make chapters and chapters coalition makes a great novel. And just like the one you just showed to the camera, which I even find to be quite voluminous, really, quite beautiful. And this always leaves me thinking, how exactly these people sit down to craft these long sentences, to craft this paragraph, these pages, these chapters, these novels, not one, not two, three, four, on and on and on and on, in a beautiful manner, in a wholesome and lovely. And this always leave me thinking how exactly they got the ideas and inspirations. I know we've talked slightly about this and touched about it quite in a swift manner, but I wanted to ask you, as far as writing is concerned, how exactly do you get your inspirations and ideas? Where do they come from?
I mentioned this conversation, which was
Yeah,
the beginning of
right.
the What Remains Unsaid. For me, it's often just a single image or a single question.
Mm,
For example, one of the stories in my collection is called The Boy in the Window.
mm,
And that came about because I was walking in my neighborhood one morning and past a house that I had seen 100 times.
Yeah.
And it just happened that morning. There's a big picture window, big glass window,
Yeah.
and there was a boy in the window that I had never
Oh.
seen him there before. And I just glanced at him as I walked by. And that image of the window and the color of the house and the way the trees were and the boy stayed with me. And I got home. I used that to dive into this imaginary story of who he was and why he was looking out the window and what was going on in the house and who else was there. And so that led me to that story.
Mm.
Sometimes it can be a bigger question. I mean, it will be something, maybe a what if question, what if, for example, I have a book that it looks at, it's actually speculative fiction, and
Mm.
it's kind of examining the idea of what if the only reason we told stories anymore was in order to sell things.
Mm.
So
Right.
we don't have any art. There's no concept of art. There's no concept of like, oh, just because it's beautiful and it touches someone else. No, it's only, you can only tell a story if you're trying to sell something.
Mm.
And I call it speculative fiction, but in many ways, I feel like we're headed down that path that
Mm.
we people use a lot of storytelling to try to convince us to behave in a certain way or buy a certain thing.
Mm.
So yeah, so those are some of the ways that I get my inspiration.
Oh,
And
wow.
I find that simply opening up, for example, doing some meditation and clearing my mind
Right.
is a great way to just let the ideas come
Go
in.
in. Yeah.
And that's where it comes from. Many writers express this, and I too feel this way, that often the ideas are not really mine, that they're
Mm.
out there. And my job is just to
Collect
clear away
them.
all the junk and
Mm.
open up and let them come.
Absolutely. Oh, wow. You've got a lovely answer to that. And I find it to be quite amazing and quite literary, really. Quite beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Because sometimes, from the conversation I've had so far with other writers and authors, they were like, well, I got ideas from things I've seen around me. I got ideas from personal life experiences. I got ideas from stories that I've heard or if drops on conversation that doesn't belong to me. I've got ideas from, stories of friends, of family members. I got ideas from news, hilariously. I had a conversation with somebody last week, like, yeah, she got ideas from the happenings in the news, the striking stories in the news. She just pick up and just make a story of it. And some would say, well, I get ideas hilariously from my dreams, the dreams I have when I go to sleep at night. And it's always amazing how we as creative get ideas from different areas of place. Quite beautiful, really. It's lovely to get to know how yours come to be. Thank you for sharing. Now, I also wanted to ask you, because your writing has been noted for its dark edge and exploration of human preoccupations. I wanted to ask you, how do you balance darker themes with moments of hope or redemption in your narratives, if in any way?
How do I do that? That is a very interesting and perhaps challenging to answer question.
Right?
I try, I think, with humor, not ha silly humor, but I think it's more a dark kind of humor, but
Right?
one that can cause a shift. So we
Mm,
have something that's very intense and we
mm,
have a little moment of humor. I think
mm.
it's very well, in terms of the craft of it, it's a little bit like pacing. So when you write a novel or really any story, you don't want the pace to be completely intense for the whole
Yeah,
novel. That,
yeah,
I mean, the reader would just get totally exhausted. So you
yeah.
have something that's very intense, and then the next chapter perhaps is
Goes
less intense.
down,
There's
slide
a
down the
little bit
speed.
of room to breathe. So
Mm,
I think it's the same with the dark and the light and maybe the intensity and the joy, or however you want to describe it. So both within an individual story, you will
right,
have something that's very heavy, but
yes.
you'll balance it with moments of joy or connection or perhaps humor. And then in putting the stories together in the collection, I was aware of that too. So I have some that are much more intense than others, and some that are a little light and fun, kind of fun and even humorous. And so
Yeah.
I was aware of, okay, I'm going to start with this one, and then I'm going to change the emotional tone as it goes along, just to give the
Mm,
reader that sense of, I don't have to be in these really heavy stories the whole
mm.
way. I think that's how I approach the balance question.
Oh, wow. That's a lovely one, really. That's a beautiful one. Thank you so much for sharing. And I love the way you were able to balance that together because I think they're very important. They're quite amazing. Sometimes when I read striking memoirs, ones that are quite very tearful, one that is able to pull you into a pool stream of emotion. And yet I'm seeing some light moment. I'm seeing funny humor in there. And I'll be like, why do you have to incorporate dark humor? Why you're telling an emotional, a sad story? You know, you've passed through these huge life experiences that is quite sorrowful, and yet you're able to utilize them. Well, I think it's a very lovely style, really, because humor is part of life. You know, in spite of the whole issue going on, there's some time we need to find a bit of humor. And I think blending all of those things together makes for a fun ride when it comes to reading.
I agree.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Now, I wanted us to diversify a little bit quite differently now into the themes of readers' feedbacks. Because you may want to agree with me that one of the things that makes literature to be quite complex in its entirety is the fact that it can be interpreted in different ways by different readers based on their opinions. And sometimes the readers might get a message intended by the author. Sometimes they might be close to getting the message. Sometimes they might be far from getting the message, say several miles or several kilometers away. And at times, too, they might hilariously misunderstand the book and interpret it upside down. You know, as interestingly fun as they sound, I would like to ask you, how do you feel when readers interpret your work differently than you intended? How does that make you feel as a writer?
I actually really like it when a an end reader of the book has a
Mm,
completely different interpretation.
yeah.
First of all, it means that they read the book, which is nice, and
Evidence.
evidence, and it means that they had an emotional reaction. So what that's really what I'm after when I want to, it's about that connection. I want to touch somebody and have them feel something. So
Mm,
to me, it doesn't matter if they feel exactly what I was intending them to feel.
ah,
They felt something, they thought about it, it sparked something in them. Now
mm,
I will say, so that's the end, once the book is published and gets out there and a reader reads it, that's how I feel. It's a little frustrating sometimes taking a few steps back. During the editing process, I do a lot of sharing of my writing with fellow writers. We look at each other's work, we give each other feedback. And it can be very frustrating at that stage to,
mm,
have something that you're trying to say and you think, oh, I've really nailed this and this is right. And you hand it to them and they get back to you and say, I didn't get this at all, or like,
ah,
oh, oh, yes, you're trying to say that. And you're like, no, 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 that's not at all what I'm saying. So
absolutely.
that's an indication that, of course, I do want to have something that I'm trying to say, and I do want to present it as clearly as possible.
Mm,
So I work on that a lot during the writing and editing process. But once it's
mm,
out there, and I'm very aware of how
yeah.
wide a range there are of reader, not just interpretations, but tastes. And
Mm,
you really, as a writer, have to reconcile yourself to the fact that not everybody is going to like every book. And there are many, many readers who might read your book, who might never read your
mm.
book because it just doesn't appeal to them at all, or they read it and they don't like it. And that's fine. There's enough readers out
Absolutely.
there that we can find the ones who are really drawn to us, I think.
Mm. I love your take on that, Will, and I think this is one of the things that makes book conversation, book club meetings to be quite fun. Is the fact
Yeah.
that we've all come together to talk about a book that we've just read. Maybe we're in a gathering of 8 people or 10 people, for instance, and the first person review differ from the second person review, differ from that of the third person, differ from that of the fourth person, and sometimes you got you wondering, sorry, did you read the same book? Did you?
Yes. You've had that experience too. Like, what? Where did that come
Like,
from?
I don't know. What are you saying?
Yeah.
Did you read that? I didn't see that really. It's a beautiful one. And I think most of the things I kind of think about this is the fact that readers tend to interpret works based on how they're able to relate with some of the characters in the story. If it's a novel, how they're able to relate and put themselves in the shoe of the characters or how much of themselves of the experiences, lived ones, that they could see reflect in the characters that the author has created. So I think this is one of the things that really makes it to be quite, vast responses. I've read books that I found to be quite amazing, powerful, lovely. Hilariously, I was checking one, I think, 3 days ago, because I was like, I wanted to republish my review on a literature magazine for the author. And I got to the point and I saw 1 star. And I was like, really? A book that I gave a lovely 5 star that I love so passionately. Somebody else seemed to deem consider it to be 1 star. It's a lot really with readers' feedbacks.
Yes. And you do have to let that go as a writer, you know.
Right.
I do
But
know some writers who don't even ever read their reviews and they don't ever look
so
at their ratings. And I'm not that way because I have a fairly thick skin. It's like, okay,
it's
so what?
thick skin.
You know,
Thick skin, they call it.
yes, yes.
Thank you. Now, apart from the books we've mentioned so far, do you have any other works you've authored or say currently working on?
Well, I've mentioned the three that we talked about, the two novels and the book collection of short stories. Actually, I mentioned the another that is called the speculative fiction is called The Last Storyteller,
Mm.
and it's currently, unfortunately, not available. I published it in 2021 on the
Oh,
Kindle
wow.
Vella platform, which was a serial platform where you would publish, you know, a chapter every week for a number of
Right.
weeks.
Yes.
And so it was out there, you know, each week it got more, and then the whole thing was out there. But they shut down that platform a few months ago. And so it's going to require work on my part to then I have to take the whole thing and republish it. So
Yeah.
I haven't done that yet. And in terms of unpublished works, I have another whole book. A lot of people wrote books during the pandemic, and I was one of them. So it took me the least amount of time any book has ever taken me,
Mm.
and in about 3.5 years. And
Wow.
I have the manuscript for it. It's actually a literary thriller called The Walking Ladies, and it's about almost exactly what you'd think, which is a group of ladies who walk together. And it's kind of got
Wow.
my signature style of something really dark with some humorous stuff,
Mm.
and starts out again. I shouldn't. I'm probably putting a lot of people off by putting out there how my books begin. So it's really it's a mystery. I call it literary thriller slash mystery. And
Mm.
then my current work that I'm really deep into, and I have been working on and off for 9 years. I
Mm.
pretty soon I'm going to have to say 10, which will be really distressing. But I love it. It's a kind of almost all my work is literary in some way, and I think of literary really as character based and dealing a lot with, you know, the emotions of the characters and having that drive the story, as
Mm.
well as an attention to language, not an overly fussy attention to language, but it's important to me. I come from a literary background, but
Mm.
this one is literary fantasy. Sometimes I call it that. Sometimes I call it a philosophical novel,
Right.
and I think I'm on my third rewrite of it. It started out one way, it became something else. Now it's morphed into something a little bit different. And I think one of the reasons that having a hard time finishing it is it's asking really, really big questions
Mm.
that, and another reason that I write and enjoy writing is to figure things out.
Yeah.
So I'm wrestling with these enormous questions. I mean, it's really, you know, what is the meaning of life? And is there anything beyond the material world out there? And, you know, do we communicate in ways other than words? Things like that.
Right.
And these are questions that, you know, I don't think we can ever really answer
Right.
definitively.
Yes.
So here I am trying to write a book in order to answer these questions, because of course in a book, you do
Mm.
need to have some sort of sense of resolution at the end. So
Yes.
I'm wrestling with how to have a resolution when I can't actually answer the questions definitively that I'm asking. But I'm
Mm.
having a lot of fun writing it. It's very important to me, and I sort of resigned myself to the fact that I may just be working on it for a really long time.
That's an
That's
amazing one, really. I love the fact that you had to take your time to answer that question. It's such a lovely and an amazing one, really. And I think you've got a lot ongoing. You've got a lot of work going, which I find to be quite commendable. And I hope you find some times to sleep.
I do. I do.
Quite beautiful, really. I love your take on that. And I also wanted to ask you, as a writing coach and a published author, you founded the Bet Your Truest Story online writers community. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes. So, Birth Your Truest Story is a free online community for writers,
Mm.
and it came about in a wonderful way. I have a dear, dear friend who lives on the East Coast. She's a teacher of literature.
Oh,
We actually have known each other since we were 6 years old.
wow.
So, we used to get together when we were very small, and we both loved to write. We would write together.
Mm,
And we went our separate ways. We did attend the same college, but then she stayed on the East Coast. I went to the West Coast.
mm,
And we were talking about probably about 10 years ago at this point about, oh, wouldn't it be fun if we did could work together somehow? We
mm,
started thinking about it. And at the time, I was working as a birth doula, which is basically a labor coach, somebody who helps women when they're having their babies.
uh,
And somehow we got the idea of, well, the process of giving birth physically to a baby, there are many parallels to giving birth creatively to a creative project. So we
mm,
came up with this Birth Your Truest Story idea. We did a workshop actually out here on the West Coast in person. And
mm.
then we offered a 9 month online
Wow.
course,
Wow.
9 months birth, giving birth, that we had people enroll in. So they would basically take an idea from the beginning to having a finished draft
Mm,
at the end of 9 months. And we found after they went through this process, they didn't want to lose this connection of these people that they had come through this experience with. So we thought, oh,
mm,
perhaps we could make something ongoing. And the timing was really good because at that point, it was just early in the pandemic. People were getting used to the fact that, oh, yes, we do these things online. We have classes, we have communities. There were a
right.
lot of platforms for communities. So
Mm,
we started it in 2021 and it has been going strong ever since. It's really and in me, it nourishes in me this craving that I mentioned in the beginning for a community and for connection with people. And there's quite
absolutely.
a few people who are members who are not particularly active. And then we have a core group who are very active and involved. And I really so appreciate them and enjoy interacting with them. We have free community writing sessions once a week, and we have a
Wow.
great group that comes to that. So it really offers, everybody's always telling me, oh, you give so much to our community. And I say, I
Mm.
get back 1,000% of what I give. It's
Oh, I
so
love that.
really satisfying.
Oh, that's a beautiful one, really. That's such
Yeah.
an amazing one. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
Thank you. And that's a very lovely title, even for a community. Bet your truest story. That's a lovely one. Just in case we have some viewers who are watching this interview, I would love to get a copy of any of your books. On what platform are they available on for purchase?
Yes. Well, the best place for people to find out about me and my books is my website, which is just my name.com. So audreykalman.com.
Oh,
And they're pretty much available wherever you get books online. And I always try to steer people to independent bookstores and
mm,
that you remind people that using bookshop.org, you can
wow.
actually get books online and also support your local independent bookstore. So
Mm,
I encourage people to do that. But if you must, you can also get them on Amazon. And
mm,
so they're available there. I think you could probably order a physical copy through a bookstore too, if you wanted, but they're not on the shelves. And that's one of the sad things about, just how many books there are out there.
a
Every
lot.
bookstore cannot have a copy of every book. So
Yeah,
luckily, we have the online way of getting things as well. And they're all available both as print books and electronically. And then this one actually is also an audiobook, which I recorded. So
mm.
that's available in three formats.
That's amazing, really. Thank you. Thank you about that. And I left a link in the description part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Audrey Kalman books directly on Amazon and Barnes& and Nobles on our website and also on other platforms. I also left a link to our social media pages for possible followings. So thank you so much, Audrey, for accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature. And most of this is more than awesome. Very great and exciting having this conversation with you around your beautiful titles. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure as well.